Hi everybody, welcome to Beyond the Lines. My name is Sarah, I'm the artist behind Pinselgeschichten, and today I'm gonna finish this particular page here in the Outlander coloring book, switching supplies from watercolors to Inktense pencils and colored pencils, as well as a few gel pens and markers. And I'm gonna talk to you about how I shade things, how I add contrast without hiding or without covering up like the whole watercolory look underneath. So I hope you enjoy. Let's get to work. So let's get started. I switched to my Inktense pencils for the next part, and I'm gonna choose my colors now to do some more shading and such. So for the background, I want a little bit of a browner color to shade. So I'm going to take the 1700, which is called Mustard. And I need my pencil sharpener. I'm also going to take that very light color here, which is very close to my light ochre in the background, and the 2020 is called Sicilian Yellow. Gonna start or gonna use those for the background. I'm gonna choose colors for the rest as well. I'm definitely gonna take the 1100 for my blue, which is dark indigo. For the reds and the browns and the beige here, I'm gonna just work on with colored pencil. I'm not gonna take Inktense to it. Am I? Yeah, no, I'm not. For the deer, which brown do I want? I need enough space to shade a little more even with colored pencils, so I'm thinking the 1730 would be cool, which is oak. It's that one here. It's very lovely. For the green, I'm gonna take two colors, I think. One of them being the 1600, which is leaf green. And I also need a little bit of a darker, even darker color. So I'm thinking either the 1310 or the 1320. I think I'm gonna go for the 1310, which is a cool color and therefore is quite the difference to the warm colors that I chose for the majority of the page. Now on to the reds. I had said in the last video that I wanted two different kinds of shades for the red to be shaded. Why are my neighbors yelling at each other? Sheesh. So for the crest itself, I'm gonna take the 600, which should be Shiraz, if I remember correctly. 600, where are you? Yeah, it's Shiraz. Fun fact, that's a red wine. And for the strawberries, I'm just gonna take colored pencils to that later on. I'm not gonna add anything there. And now it is time to bring all those pencils to the paper and then liquefy the pigment. Now I'm gonna put down all of the colors first and then liquefy all in one go. I think that's a little more fun than just, you know, going back and forth, Feel like putting pencils down first today, like all the pencils. So I'm sharpening them. I don't like that my neighbors are yelling at each other. I hope it's not on audio. If it is, I'm very sorry about that, but I can't hardly control my neighbors, can I? I mean, there we go. I'm gonna start off with the brown. Now I gotta remember which one I wanted. I wanted the oak for the deer. And I'm just going to add a little bit of shadow here on the lower part. In the last video, I had mentioned that I would shade everything towards the bottom because there's no light source here. So that's what I'm gonna do with where I put my colors. Excuse me. Of course, gonna add a little more pencil too because I want some of the details to be painted in or shaded, but mainly I'm shading towards the bottom. I'm really kind of distracted by the yelling going on. I think you won't be able to hear it on audio. I mean, if I'm unable to edit that out, I'm sorry about that. But I think it's quiet enough for you to not hear that. On to the greens. I'm going to start with the leaf green and bring that in. Just going over some of the parts of the leaves here. Also working with the details and the line work that has been given to me by the illustrator. But I'm also just adding an overall shadow to certain things. And again, I'm shading towards the bottom, just adding a little bit of pigment here and there. I'm gonna go a little darker on things around the strawberries because I want them to pop. And since this is a 2D kind of a crest here, I'm really mainly going around the lines that are drawn in. I'm not gonna put in the very dark green, I think it's called Malachite green or something like that. Let me check. It is called, oh, iron green. I'm not gonna go for that pencil yet. First gonna liquefy the leaf green that I do have in my hand. And only then, once I have the page dried, gonna add a little more of that very dark, cool green where I think I need it. This is quite the fast process here, and that's what I like about the Inktense. If you put it on top of another medium, you can very quickly lay down just a little bit of pigment and then control it with your brush where you pull it in the end. But you get a little bit of contrast and dimension and depth and such fairly quickly if you just scribble down a little bit of that pencil to go for the shadows. I mean, you could be way more precise, and you kind of have to be, or I kind of have to be later on with other parts of this picture, but with the green here I can work fairly quickly. Just squiggle on some of the green here and there where some of the lines are drawn in. And be done with it. So around the strawberry leaves. I have to be very precise here when it comes to adding water later on. But for now, I can be a little less precise with the pencil here. It's been quite a while since I worked with the Inktense pencils, at least on Beyond the Lines. I've used them on Art Day recently. So as you can see, this hardly takes any time at all. Which again is a lovely way to use supplies on when you have an underpainting done in your coloring pages, or it's the same thing for your own paintings, in case you are working with watercolors and such, or want to try something there. It's really lovely to almost have like a sketchy look while you're working on something, and then have the watercolory look once you're done and you have your pigment liquefied. So for these excuse me, for these leaves here, I'm just doing a little bit in the center, like the veins of the leaves, so to say. And there's the green. Now I can move on to, I'm not going to use the iron green yet. I can move on to the blue. Again, shading towards the bottom. And the same goes here on this part. And then on the banner, I'm gonna start where I definitely know that the shadows are, because this is quite the twirly-whirly, and I'm not always all that sure if if I'm looking at the inside or the outside of one of those bits of fabric here. I think this is top, so I'm just shading towards the bottom. This is definitely inside. And then there's a little bit of dark blue here. And good question, probably here. Same on the other side, there's the inside of the fabric, and then shading towards the bottom. And we have the inside of the fabric here, and towards the bottom is that part. Then we have inside and towards the bottom. And inside, I'd say. And only very little towards the bottom. There we go with the blue. Onto the red. And finally the two browns. So the mustard will go around here. And I'm also gonna add a little bit to these bricks here. So I'm just working with the line work that the illustrator gave me here. Underneath the antlers, needs to be a little bit of a darker bit. And again, squiggly line work. done the outside of the crest. Definitely here there's gonna be mustard. Same here and here. Need to sharpen my pencil again. And I can shade underneath these leaves here, add a little bit of the mustard, a lot of the mustard here, underneath that bit. More squiggly lines here and here and here. And squiggly lines here where there's a few of the dots and such from the bricks. And then I can move on to my Sicilian yellow and do something quite hideous, but I hope since it is pretty quick, it's not too bad for you guys. I'm just gonna add a little bit of that color on all the bricks. Not being super precise like coloring every brick on its own, but trying only to shade them towards the bottom. Just pulling in one little line of that Sicilian yellow. I'm gonna pull the pigment that way later on when I liquefy that pigment. I might need a little more here. Just go a little higher. It looks really messy right now, I know, but trust me, it's all gonna work out. And for some of the bits, I'm gonna definitely work with colored pencils and not the Inktense. But I rather like the fast way of being able to shade something. And since I'm going to liquefy the pigment, I don't have to be precise with the way I'm putting down the Inktense pencil here. Can be fairly rough and not very artistic looking, honestly. And second to last row, and the last row. Now the crazy thing happens. Let's make this look rather nice. I'm gonna start with the bricks here, like the ones that I had just colored in. I'm gonna liquefy the pigment that I put down and pull it towards the top of the respective row of stones. You can see this is a very, very subtle shadow, since I chose those colors to be quite alike. And I'm just gonna go around the page now and bring in that shadow for those little bricks. And by moving my brush not this way but this way, when liquefying that ink pigment here, I'm not gonna have these stripy looks that you definitely can see right now on the page, where I only put on the dry pencil. Can definitely pull this in a way that it's nicely shaded, still shaded towards the bottom only, but it's a little irregular how high I do pull that pigment. And that makes for a lovely contrast already. It just takes a long, long while to go around all of these stones and liquefy the pigment. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna time-lapse this only for the bricks. I'm not gonna time-lapse the whole water on Inktense kind of a process, but for these bricks here, it's the same thing all around the page. So I'm gonna quickly put on some music and see you back in a hot second. All right, now that this is done, I can go into the mustard kind of a color here that I used in the center and do the same thing that I did before with the Sicilian yellow, just going over those squiggles and lines and such and liquefy the pigment. Feather it out quite a bit. There's squiggles up here and here. It makes the painting a little more uneven, which I like a lot when it comes to the colors and the shading and such. It looks a little more watercolory slash natural. Not as if I would have really colored in or drawn in all of the shadows here. Like with a ruler or something. This is way more natural looking, which again I like a lot. Be a little careful here on the edges where I do have that indigo, for example, right next to my mustard yellow, because I don't want to pull the indigo pigment. So I gotta be quite aware of where my brush is, like where the top of the bristles are. Make sure I don't pull blue pigment, just mustard colored pigment. Because in regards to how I can manipulate the pigment, once this is dry, so the Inktense is dried, I cannot move that pigment anymore. So though they behave like watercolors in the process, like you could take a watercolor pencil and draw your object and then go around the painting with like a brush or something and liquefy the pigment. But you can do that over and over and over again with watercolors, and you can't with Inktense. Once this is dry, this is gonna stay permanent and can't make something bleed together anymore, or just, you know, you can't manipulate the pigment anymore. It's absolutely permanent once it's dry. Which is very helpful, by the way, if you want to layer things and you don't want every layer underneath to be reactivated. I would suggest you to go for Inktense for a couple of layers and then maybe layer watercolor on top again. that is very helpful for when you don't want something to be manipulated once you have painted it. Last little bits of the mustard pencil. And I need a little water here underneath the antlers where I put that mustard pencil as well. There we go. So this is the mustard pencil liquefied. Now I could go on to the brown next thing maybe. So I'm going for the oak brown pencil and I'm just pulling the pigment upwards. And downwards respectively here underneath the ear. We go. Now I have to refill my brush because this is almost empty and then I can move on to the green parts. All right, my brush is refilled, so I can move on to these green bits here now. And I'm just carefully going around all of these bits and pieces here. I'm bringing in my contrasty shading color. fun fact, by the way, and totally not related to coloring. Since it is November that this is going to be published, and I'm actually filming very early September today, the weather is quite gloomy and gray and rainy, so it almost feels like November that I'm filming this. Gosh. It's lovely when the weather gods want to make it easier for you to get into the swing of things and feel like you're really in that time when you are publishing videos, if you're working ahead. And they make for a very gloomy day. So the challenge of not coloring those leaves from the strawberries is almost finished. Yeah, there we go. Got around the leaves. I'm gonna highlight them a little bit later on with colored pencils. Set them apart a bit from the rest of this whatever cresty green thing here. This part here, when you lay down all your pencils all in one go like I did, this part here where you just go all over the page and put on some water to liquefy that inky pigment, this is actually quite zen-y, if you know what I mean. If you know the feeling from your own artwork, maybe. This is quite lovely. Just a little more and the green is done. Then I can move on to the green on those lower leaves and take care of that before I move on to blue. Green leaf number 1, green leaf number 2, and number 3, And of course, number 4. You guessed right. It would be leaf number 4. All right. Now I can move on to the blue. Got to be quite careful not to pull it into the blue, the gray / silver bits here too much. So I have to carefully get around. Get around those flowers here. Number 1. Number 2, I'm doing the same thing. And even if it's maybe not as clearly visible on camera, I can very much distinguish between the parts that have no Inktense on them and the parts of the painting that do have Inktense on them. So I know where to go with my brush and where there's pigment to go ahead and liquefy. It's maybe a little more visible in this part here. And there's even more down here. More to come over here, and lots of blue, dark blue over here. Because this is where there's a lot of shadow, hardly any contrast between like the front of the fabric and the back of the fabric. And onto the other side. And same here, feathering things out towards the top. Therefore shading the bottom. And the last tiny little bit for the blue. Again, lots of indigo here. And feathering it out towards the top of that section. There we go. That's all the blue. Now I can move on to the red. Just squiggly lines going over everything here. And pulling things towards the top. Just 3 more squares. And then I can dry this off, go in with the iron green of the ink tints. And then I can move on to my colored pencils already. So quickly blasting this with my blow dryer. There we go. So now where's my dark green? There it is. I'm gonna have very few bits only shaded with that dark green. Mainly some of these swirls here. In order not to forget where I put that dark green, I'm going over it right away. So I'm very carefully laying that down, not feathering out the green as much as I did with the leaf green, but kind of enhancing some of the lines rather. I'm choosing lines that go either towards the side or towards the bottom so that the shadows are enhanced pretty much. Because I kind of see these squiggly lines here as curly leaves. I think you will agree with that. So some of these lines should have more like a shadow that they're casting. I think I need a little bit here in that leaf, and then I think I'm already done with ink tints, and I can dry this off and move on to my colored pencils. Yeah, and shade things there a little more, and use gold and silver as well. All right, let's get my pencils here, starting off with the antlers of the deer. I'm choosing a warm gray for that to be shaded. And since I put watercolors underneath, the paper has a lot of tooth, so the pencil really lays down well. And I don't have to do too much to get the pencil to stick. So I'm just going around all of the bits, shading the antlers preferably towards the bottom. And I don't have to add much because I put the colored pencil underneath. Now I need my two pencils that are in pencil extenders already and not in the tin. So I do have sepia, which is the brown that I'm gonna use here on the details of the deer. Just to enhance some of the furry lines here. Don't need any more of that brown. Let's get to red first before I go on with green and blue on the crest here. I'm just working my way from the top to the bottom here, so I'm gonna bring in dark red for the strawberries. Make them pop quite a bit. And then I'm going to use a light yellow for the blossoms. Shading those towards the bottom as well, but since they're very tiny, there's hardly anything I could do for shading itself. Now I'm gonna go reverse and highlight things, namely the leaves from the strawberries. The ones that I've tried to color around when working with Inktense. Just adding a little bit of that May green here and there. I'm also going to use a little bit of that light yellow on top of the green, just to give it a little more of a spring, fresh kind of feel, just a bit, to make them pop out. Ooh, that was my vlogging camera and I got startled. Oh well. And then I'm gonna use a dark green. I'm gonna go for the pine green, just outlining those leaves a little more, those tiny strawberry leaves. Doing the same thing with the stems too. Because one of the disadvantages of Inktense is they almost blur lines. It's almost like a foggy milk glass kind of a feel that you get when you put Inktense on something. It takes away from the crisp edges or crisp lines. So I like to go over certain lines with a colored pencil or with a marker in the end where I think I need that harsh separation. And in this case it's, well, colored pencil. There we go. I think the rest of the green is fine. I can move on to the dark red here and just add a tiny little bit of that with my colored pencil to the crest itself. Again, I don't want this to look exactly the same as the strawberries, but a little bit of oomph I think is just fine. And then I can move on to my lovely indigo blue. Cleaning up some of the bits here around the crest. Really just cleaning up lines. Same down here, just going for the inner parts of the swirls, darkening them even more. And they're like that, make very crisp outlines here. Same on the other side. All right, now I can go on to the silver pencil and the gold pencil and work on the crest and everything. So the gold lay down pretty well. I don't really have to do a lot. With the silver, I actually need to work a little more, I think. But let's go with gold first. Just a little more. Almost done. I don't really know if you can see the difference on camera, but rest assured I can see it in real life. And the last little bit here. There we go, that's the gold. Now onto the silver. I'm not really seeing any shimmer here from the watercolor silver, so I'm just going over the whole thing with my silver pencil, which adds quite a bit of shimmer. And then I can move on to a black pencil and put that on top for the crowns. So the silver pencil lays down very well on top of the watercolor. Again, the watercolor makes for the paper to have quite a bit of extra tooth. So that is also one thing that I like a lot when it comes to underpaintings. It doesn't matter if I just have the light gray without the silver watercolor on top or not. It provides enough tooth for the color pencil here to lay down really well. Okay, onto the other flowers. And then I can move on to the crest down here. So I'm just gonna give this a whole layer of silver colored pencil on top. Ooh, shouldn't go over my blue stuff though. And I'm using large ellipses to color. When I tilt my head just right, I can see where I was with my silver pencil. Make sure that I have everything covered before I start shading. All right, now I can start shading, and I'm gonna take the Payne's Gray for that. Just very lightly draw in a few shadowy bits here behind the strawberries. Then I can move on to actually shade the brooch itself a bit. So I'm working with a very, very light touch here. Just want to lay down a tiny little bit of that Payne's gray. It's maybe a little more here. Yep, that's more like it. I really need to check every so often, and I need to tilt my paper, because otherwise I can't really see if things are okay with all the shimmer going on. So drawing in the black crowns, and then I can move on to gel pen and marker for the eye of the stag or the deer. I think it's a stag because it has antlers. And then I can do the final check and probably call this page done. Need to sharpen my pencil though. So this is really the last leg of the picture, and therefore Beyond the Lines in 2020. I hope you enjoyed the year on this show. You liked what I produced. I definitely had a lot of fun with those pictures here, and I'm very happy that I'm moving quite quickly through the book right now. So 2021 should be the year that I can finish this book. So now I can move on to the gel pens. I need you, and the marker. I'm having a 0.1 marker to bring in those tiny dots here a little more from those strawberries, because they got quite lost. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope you're looking forward to 2021. I don't know at this point what life will be like end of November, but I'm hoping that everything went a little bit more back to normal. I'm hoping that 2021 it will continue to go even further back to normal. I hope you're enjoying every bit of December, Christmas coming up, and New Year's and Hanukkah and all of that. So I would very much love for you to enjoy that time and be creative, be inspired, maybe have some time for artwork, not only end of year stress, you know. I wish you all the best for the next year, so make 2021 your own, guys. I think I'm done with this picture now, and that means with this video and therefore the show for 2020. Thank you again for watching this video, watching the whole show over the last many months, and I'm gonna talk to you in January, coming up with this one here as the first video for Beyond the Lines in the next year. So thank you again, have a lovely time. I'm gonna see you next year and enjoy yourselves. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.